So today we will be reviewing the license renewal process and continuing education requirements. To start, we'll be going through the license renewal process. I think most of you are familiar with that, but just to kind of walk through as a refresher. Then we will go into continuing education, what that looks like, dive a little bit into the audits, and then have time for questions and answers, hopefully answers. All right, so who can renew? Licensees whose last names begin with the letters A through K, the renewal period is now open for those licensees. Licensees whose last names begin with the letters L through Z can still renew until December 31st, but after that, you must complete the reinstatement process in order to renew your license. And you also, if you are a letter L through Z, you must request a paper renewal form, as you cannot do that online right now. Let's see, payments accepted are Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or eCheck. Those renewal notifications were sent to licensees who are eligible for renewal. And just as a reminder, the renewal forms must be received and processed online no later than 11:59 on December 31st to avoid any late payment fees. The renewal fee is $80, and after that December 31st deadline, an additional $8 per month late fee is assessed per month, but up to $80. So $8 a month for every month late after December 31st. There are two avenues to renewing your license. The first is through the board's online portal, which is located on our website at ea.nebraska.gov. So you navigate to either the Architects or Engineers tab, click on Renew, and this screen pops up. You will log into the online renewal system. You will need your license number and then the last four of your social security number. The renewal process, as you guys probably know, is pretty easy. You review and update your information and answer those disclosure questions accurately. So as a reminder, it is a violation of the board's rules to not answer those disclosure questions truthfully and accurately. If you have any questions about that, we can go into that a little bit later. Your receipts, once that renewal process is completed, your receipts can be either emailed or printed for you. The other avenue to renew your license is by your paper renewal. So if you would like to renew it through paper, you need to contact our office to request that form. Again, review, update your information, answer those disclosure questions accurately. You need to return that application before that deadline of December 31st at 11:59 with the applicable fee to avoid those additional charges. A receipt will be mailed to you once that payment has been received by our office. And as a note, if you come in person to pay a renewal fee, you must have a check or exact cash. Our office cannot take card payments or provide any kind of change. During the renewal application process, you can elect emeritus status instead of renewing your license. It is a $25 fee. Emeritus status does not allow you to practice architecture or engineering, but it does allow you to use the honorary titles of Architect Emeritus or Professional Engineer Emeritus. So again, find the field, elect emeritus status, either online or the paper application, and enclose that $25 fee. The board gets lots of questions on if the board maintains a retired or inactive list, and the board does not. The options for licensure in Nebraska is emeritus or active status. There's no other title in Nebraska. So again, that renewal process is pretty simple. Most of you have been doing it for quite a while. Any questions that you have? Oh, I see in the chat box. It looks like Johnny answered that question. But if you have any additional questions about the renewal process, please type that into the chat and we will get those answered. Otherwise, we are going to move on to continuing education. So what's changed this year? The board has decoupled audits from the renewal process. So previously, licensees were notified during the renewal process if they were selected for an audit. Going forward, licensees will be notified after the following year. So after January 1st, you will be notified if you were selected for an audit, and you will be instructed on how to submit those that documentation supporting your hours claimed. Again, audit selection remains random. However, the board may audit any licensee for compliance with CE requirements per the rules. So architects must complete 24 hours of architectural related learning activity every biennial period, and professional engineers must complete 30 hours every biennial period. What topics are acceptable? Continuing education topics must be either technical in nature or a topic that's part of the profession's body of knowledge as developed by the applicable, National Professional Engineering Society, or categorized as a health, safety, and welfare topic by NCARB. So I'm going to go over Rule 9.2 points out or identifies several activities that are acceptable for continuing education. We're just going to go over a few of them. If you need more ideas or additional information, again, refer to Rule 9.2. But these are the most common activities that the board sees. So successful completion of college courses from an AEC, ABET, or NAB accredited program. Successful completion of short courses, tutorials, and web-based activities for self, independent, or group study. Presenting or attending qualifying seminars, workshops, technical presentations. Authoring published papers, books, and articles. Participating in the development of items for NCES or NCARB examination. I believe that's a rules change, potential proposed rules change. So on that note, the board is updating the rules and we have proposed rules changes. They are not into effect, but any of these activities listed here in the presentation, the board will likely give credit for. So if any of these new topics or areas of activities applies to you and you're selected for an audit, like I said, the board will likely honor that activity as well. Okay, it's an active rule, my bad. Some more activities: active participation in professional or technical societies as an officer or technical committee member related to the practice of architecture or engineering, authoring a patent related to architecture or engineering, participation in education outreach for K through 12 students, serving as an ABET, AEC, or NAB accredited program evaluator. I know a couple of those are newish. So again, take a look at Rule 9.2, be on the lookout for those updated rules. I think we have a hearings maybe scheduled for December, possibly. Let's go into restrictions. I know that there's a lot of questions about specifically about Rule 9.3.1. So we are going to try to make this as clear as possible and hopefully everybody understands this. So web-based offerings provided by an IECET approved provider, institution of higher education that has an accredited program in architecture or engineering, professional engineering or architectural societies, technical societies and associations recognized at a national level, governmental agencies, or NCARB and NCES may constitute all of the education requirement, even though it's web-based. So again, if it's web-based and provided by one of these entities, letters A through F, you can get all of your continuing education through these providers. However, web-based offerings from a provider not on the previous, so not on the A through F on the previous slide, may constitute no more than 1/4 of the education requirement. So that's 6 hours for architects and 7.5 hours for professional engineers. So if you're completing courses through PDH Direct and it's not live and it's not interactive, which is the next part of this slide here, then it is a restricted course and it is limited to 6 hours for architects and 7.5 hours for engineers, professional engineers. However, web-based offerings, including webinars, video conferences, and online meetings that are led by an instructor that enables both the instructor and attendees to receive, give, and discuss information in real time is not restricted. So, for example, I'm going to use PDH Direct because I used that earlier. If you're completing a course through PDH Direct and it is live and interactive in real time, led by an instructor, it gives you the opportunity to discuss, receive, give information in real time, even though it's technically on the computer, it is not restricted. Any questions on that? This is real time. We have developed a flow chart here, and I believe this is also on our website. Josh, correct? Yes. Okay. It's on our website as well. I believe it's under the CE tabs on our website. But this is just to kind of help people determine if the courses are restricted or not. So again, walking through the steps. Is it led by an instructor that enables both the instructor and attendees to give, receive, and discuss that information in real time? Yes, then it's not restricted. If you answered no, move on to the next step. Is that activity provided by any of those providers, A through F, 1 through 6, same thing? If it is, then it's not restricted. If it is not, then it is restricted, and you can have no more than 6 hours for architects and 7.5 for professional engineers. Yes, it's for the whole 2-year period. So your continuing education log, which we'll go over in a second, can have no more, well, it could have more than 6 or 7.5 hours, but it can't be counted any more than 6 hours for architects, 7.5 for professional engineers. Tim, this restriction has been in place for years. This is just going over, again, a refresher, clarifying the information. But it has, yes, it has been in place for many years. Lots of confusion around it, so we try to continue to clear it up. Other restrictions, at least 1 hour must be directly related to ethical issues of a licensee's professional practice. My understanding, Nebraska is a little bit unique in this requirement, but Nebraska does require 1 hour in your 2-year renewal period that has to be directly related to ethical issues. And as a reminder, again, the board has final authority with respect to approval of courses and credits. And again, the board does not pre-approve any courses. Another activity that is restricted are the self-guided activities. So self-guided activities planned and performed under the licensee's own discretion and guidance may constitute no more than 1/4 of the biennial requirement as well. So 6 hours for architects, 7.5 for engineers. This is in conjunction with the web-based courses, meaning you can't have 6 hours, if you're an architect, you can't have 6 hours of those restricted web-based courses and 6 hours of self-guided activity. They're not together. Each activity is different. However, to be able to use that self-guided activity, you must complete and submit the board's self-guided form. So as you can see on the screen, this is what our self-guided reporting form looks like. It needs to be filled out in its entirety and submitted if you are selected for an audit. John, are you taking care of this? Questions, or do you want me to touch on them quick?
I'm trying to researching. There's this question about ASCE or ASME committee meetings, and I'm looking up our proposed rules because we're going to address this, and I want to pull the language that's out of there, which directly answers this question here. So just give me a second.
Sounds good. I'll go back through here and see if we have any other questions I can quickly answer. With other boards, 1-hour ethics courses approved for Nebraska as long as it's covering ethics. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, you're asking if, for example, I believe Florida and Texas each require a licensee to complete their ethics course. If so, yes, Nebraska does recognize that. Verify if the ethics course needs to be designated as such. If it's not completely obvious that it is an ethics course, likely board staff will reach out to get that information. So if you're selected for an audit and again, you don't have a course that specifically states ethics, likely, like I said, a staff member will reach out and ask if you had completed a course or not. And if so, then you can provide your documentation or reasoning as to why a certain course maybe fulfill that requirement. Let me grab my book for these other ones quick. While I'm looking, Robert, yes, self-guided is separate from web-based limits as long as that self-guided activity doesn't meet the definition of web-based courses, which it shouldn't. But yes, you can have, if you're an architect, you can have 6 hours of web-based courses and 6 hours of self-guided activity. It's not a total of both.
Yeah. Let me answer Brian's question here. Participation in a career fair. I believe that would count under Rule 9.2 under outreach. I'm not sure we've seen a lot of career fairs though, but my guess is the board would accept those. It's a little interesting though. A career fair is a bit different from, what typically is understood as K through 12 outreach activities, like, making them aware of the professions. Yeah, I'd have to get with the board and discuss that one, because I'm not sure how they would see a career fair.
I would agree.
Yeah. Steven's asking, if you take a 2-credit ethics class, will both credits count towards the continuing education requirements? Yes, the minimum is 1 hour. So if you're talking now, are you asking about credits as the unit of measurement or hours? Because they could be two very different things.
We're going to talk about carryover here and
Yeah.
such in just a few more slides. So looks like you said hours, John. So
Hours,
again,
yeah.
we'll talk about carryover here and specifically ethics as well. Hopefully that will answer your question. If not, Stephen, please let us know.
Yeah, Ken, let me answer this other question from Ken. Attendance at educational seminars for learning how to use software. I believe in the past, the board has kind of taken a bit more critical look at those. So there could potentially be issues if it's like for, if you're using to learn like Excel or Word or QuickBooks, typically those won't be acceptable. Something specifically about engineering software could be more likely to be accepted. Junior achievement in regards to K through 12. I think that might be closer to educational outreach, the intent of the rule. So I think there's a better chance of junior achievement activities being allowable for CE. I did want
Yes.
to actually answer one of that question earlier. I did some research. There's a question about I'm on a committee of the American Society of Civil Engineers. This committee, according to the question, he's a member of the standards committee, writing new standards, and they have at least 2 meetings per month, each 1 hour. So one of the new rules that we're proposing is we're kind of tweaking Rule 9.2.3.7, which talks about active participation in a professional or technical society. So the new rule will say, and I'll try to actually post it here. Well, it not will say, we're proposing that it says, and let me paste it in here to the chat so you can all see it. Hopefully, got some. I may have some returns in there. So we're tweaking it to say the licensee serves either as an officer or actively participates in a technical committee of the society. So the word technical is something that we're proposing to add to that. And then I believe we're going to talk about how much credit you get for those here in a second.
I wanted to go back. I see some more comments coming in, but I wanted to go back to Jonathan's question about the junior achievement in regards to K through 12. And I want to make sure we clarify that 9239 specifically says if the outreach activities are pertaining to professional licensure or the architecture engineering professions that involve K through 12 students. Let's see. Let's get a few more questions here.
Yeah, Tim asked another question on software. Again, if it's the software is always a tricky one. I would tend to think that if it could be shown that this is really, you learned how to best use the software and the software is only applicable towards the practice of engineering, there's a better chance it would be accepted than, just run-of-the-mill Microsoft programs. But I can't guarantee that those would be accepted. Yeah, the board does take a critical look at those software credits.
Matt, to answer your question, yes, the new audit procedures start for this renewal period. So anybody A through K renewing their license now will be notified after January 1 if they've been selected for an audit. It may be January, it may be February, so that's why it's just after January 1st. And then, yes, you will be notified how to submit your continuing education information.
Melissa asks about if an engineer does training session for other engineers, that would typically count for CE if it meets all the other requirements.
Which we'll go over.
Yeah, and usually, yeah, well, Amy will go into that here soon. Peter asks, would ethics classes in other occupations They wouldn't. The ethics, it has to be related to the ethical practice of engineering or architecture. Scotty, yes, you can have your internal HR legal team present a course on ethics. Yep, you absolutely can.
All right, good questions, everyone. I think we will move on to units carryover and such, and if we don't cover your questions by the end of the presentation, we will definitely have some time here to ask some more questions. So as far as units for continuing education, 1 actual hour to claim is equivalent to at least 50 minutes of instruction. So you participate in a course that's 50 minutes, you get 1 hour of CE credit. 1 semester credit of formal education is 45 actual hours to be claimed. 1 quarter, 30 hours. Credit for teaching or presenting an activity may be credited or double the actual hours. However, the credit is only valid for the first presentation. Full-time faculty may not claim credit associated with regular teaching duties. So this was Melissa's question about presenting to other engineers. As long as that presentation is for the first time, you can claim those hours. We have seen where people, do that presentation over and over and over. If the material hasn't changed or there's not enough change to really show the hour or whatever presentation, you can't receive credit for that. So if you're doing a presentation on topic A, you can receive that credit for the presentation. If you go to do topic A again and nothing's changed, you cannot claim those hours. However, if you're doing topic A and let's say rules changed and all, it's a significant amount of change, then you may be able to claim that activity again. Each published peer review paper or book is 10 hours. Paper or article is 5, patent 10 hours. Let's see here. We have some more examples. Again, 9.4 points all this out or defines all of this. So if you have additional questions or want to reference it later, go to Rule 9.4. It's page 49 of the handbook. Active participation as an officer in a professional and technical society, 2 actual hours. Hours are not earned until the end of each year of service is completed. Participation on professional or technical societies, technical committees is equivalent to the actual hours spent on that committee. And these are some of the new proposed rules that we have proposed, I guess, the rules changes. Developing exam items for NCES or NCARB, 15 actual hours per calendar year. Serving on an ABET, EAC, or NAB accreditation program evaluation team is 15 actual hours per evaluation. I think those questions are getting answered up there. If not, we can answer them here in a little bit. Carryover. So all licensees can carry up to half of their required credits from the previous 2-year period. So that's architects can carry over up to 12 hours, professional engineers 15 hours. Documentation must be provided to prove that the licensee has those carryover hours. So if you are selected for an audit and you are claiming, and your renewal period is this year, and you're selected for an audit, which the continuing education is for year 22 and 23 for this renewal period. If you're claiming hours from 2020 to 2021, you must submit all of your continuing education documents for 2021 and 22-23 to show that you have that carryover. You can't just submit 22-23 and then 12 hours of random courses from years 2020 and 2021. You have to submit all of the documents for both renewal periods to show that that carryover exists in order for the board to count it. Ethics hours can be carried over. So we had a question earlier about if I complete 2 hours this renewal period, can I carry over or can it count? If you complete 2 hours and you have of ethics and you have, let's say, 32 hours of continuing education for the 22-23 renewal period, you would have 2 hours of carryover for the next renewal period, and one of those hours could be that ethics course, 1 hour of ethics. Any questions on carryover? All right, record keeping. Maintenance of records used to support continuing education hours claimed is the responsibility of the licensee. The board does not keep track of hours that are carried over. We do not keep track of your annual hours. We don't even ask that you submit continuing education unless you were selected for an audit. So I know some states do keep track of carryover. Nebraska is not one of them. Records must be maintained for 4 years. Again, that's kind of to show if you have carryover, but then also if anything were to come up that the board may request that documentation for verification purposes. So 4 years. Required records include, but are not limited to, a log. You have to have a CE log, and we'll show you that in the next slide, showing the type of activity, the organization, location, duration, who the speaker is, and the credits earned. With that log, you have to have attendance verification records. So that can be in the form of completion certificates, self-guided reports, email confirmations, things of that nature, some kind of attendance verification form. But if you are selected for an audit, you must have those 2 things, CE log and some type of attendance verification. Other records that are accepted are records maintained by NCES, AIA, or any other entity like that. Again, it needs to have the same information listed as the first bullet on here, type of activity, organization, location, things of that nature. The board has a CE log template. It is located on our website, again, ea.nebraska.gov. This log really has all the information that, again, the rules state and that we went over in this last slide. So the date, the organization, activity, hours, do you have a certificate, web-based? Is it restricted per that rule 9.3.1 that we've already gone over? So if you do not have your own template, again, the board does have this website that's free, or this template that is free to use. So if you would like that, again, go to our website, navigate to engineers or architects, continuing education, and I believe it's also under forms. Exemptions and waivers to CE requirements. So anybody who is in their first renewal period, if you were licensed in 2023 this year, you are exempt from this renewal period. Again, first renewal period, you're exempt. Any hours that you earn may be eligible for carryover if you complete the minimum requirement. So if you are an architect and you complete 30 hours, you would have 6 hours of carryover into the new biennial renewal period. Engineers, anything over 30, you can carry over. Serving on active military duty for a period of 120 days in a calendar year. Rule 9612 goes over military participation and activity. So if that applies to you, you can select that during your renewal process and then supply that additional information. Typically, we ask for orders to show that you are participating in active military. Physical disability, if you're experiencing a physical disability or illness, the board typically asks for supporting documentation in order to review and approve. But if that applies to you, we do get those, we get it, the board gets it, life happens, things happen, it's unexpected. elect that during your renewal and submit some documentation, and the board will take a look at that. Oh, hold on. Apparently, Alexa was listening because she pulled up something that didn't even apply. So I apologize. And then you're also exempt if your license is in emeritus status. Jennifer, we will talk about emeritus just here in a second. I think John is covering those other ones. If not, we can go back. So here's just a summary of hours, again, broken down by professional engineers and architects. Engineers need 30 total hours, architects 24. Engineers are restricted to 7.5 of those web-based courses. Architects 6. Same thing with self-guided, 7.5 and 6. Everybody must complete 1 hour of ethics. And then allowed carryover max is 15 for professional engineers and 12 for architects. Okay, so we're going to quickly get into audits. If you are selected for an audit, again, you will be notified after the first of the year of how to submit that documentation. The board, again, may audit a licensee for compliance with CE requirements. Licensees are selected randomly, but will not exceed 5%. You're required to provide documentation of compliance. So again, if you renew, this is your renewal period, your hours need to be from 22 and 23. Hours claimed in 21 or 20, unless they are carryover, will not be counted. If they're carryover hours, you have to submit all of your documentation. So all of your CE log and all of your attendance verifications. Do not send your CE documentation to the board unless you're contacted. So a lot of times we get people who just submit it right away. Again, you will be notified if you are selected for an audit, so please do not submit that to the board. If you're selected for an audit and the board disallows any of those continuing education hours claimed, the applicant must, within 60 days after that notification of disallowance, substantiate the original claim or earn other credit to satisfy the continuing education requirement. So kind of going back to that ethics question, and that's maybe not even the board disallowing, if the board, let's say one of those software examples, if the board chose to disallow that, you would be notified and you have 60 days to either state your argument as to why you feel it is appropriate continuing education, or have 60 days to obtain new courses to fulfill the requirements. Extension time may be granted on an individual basis, but that has to be requested by the licensee within 30 days after that disallowance, and it cannot exceed an additional 60 days. And again, kind of going back to audits, you will be notified the beginning of the year if you were selected for this renewal period. And during that notification, you will be notified on how to submit your documents. So I just wanted to put in here some audit compliance and trends in audit failures that we've seen. Too many web-based courses. That's probably the #1 audit failure for us over the last few years. Not for us, we've seen in Nebraska. So again, 7.5 hours max if it's a true web-based course not provided by one of those entities listed in 9.3.1. 7.5 hours for professional engineers, 6 hours for architects maximum. That's it. PDH engineering, if it's not live and interactive, 7.5 and 6. Too many self-study hours submitted. We've already kind of talked about that. 7.5 and 6. Failed to submit your CE log and supporting documentation. You have to submit both. There has to be a CE log and there has to be supporting evidence of those hours claimed. Failure to submit documentation for carryover hours claimed. I think I've said this enough during the presentation. Again, you have to submit all of your attendance verifications, and CE log for that whole renewal period if you're claiming carryover. And then hours completed outside of the renewal period. So when you're answering those renewal questions and attesting that you have completed your CE documentation or your CE requirements, you need to make sure that you are not renewing your license until you have verified that you have a minimum of 30 or 24 hours, depending on if you're a professional engineer or architect. You have to have those hours before you renew. But any hours then completed outside of the renewal period also do not count. So with that said, I'm going to open it up for more questions and answers, and we'll take a look at what's been put in the chat box.
Let me try to answer some of these questions. Jim asked, what's the primary issue with web-based self-study courses? What happened was the board took a look at this probably almost 10 years ago now. They were concerned of the quality of some of the online providers, and and people were claiming hours from some of these providers, approaching and over 24 hours in one day. And so that's really what raised the board's eyebrow, is like, we need to look at some of these providers. And, some of them are, unfortunately, these fly-by-night pop-up providers that you review something, presentation online, and then get CE credit for it. So that's why the board instituted these rules now nearly 10 years ago on restricted providers.
And with that said, I'm going to jump in real quick, John. If you do have, let's say, more than 8 or 10 of the hours like that, the board will question how you were able to complete. I mean, I have had people submit 30 hours in a day of these providers. And so the board, be prepared to answer questions as to how you were to successfully complete 30 hours of continuing education in a 24-hour period. So you may get that response if that is something you submit.
Yeah, and Matt asked this question: if a webinar such as this counts as live, if there is only a question and answer session at the end, presenter was live the entire time. I believe the intent of the rule is that you're able to discuss and ask questions throughout the whole thing. Now, whether you're able to do it via chat or actually through a microphone, it really doesn't matter. But the intent of the rule was be able to do it throughout the entire thing. Now, if there's just a Q&A at the end, some presentations are set up like that, where I'm going to hold all the questions on this till the end, and that's fine, right? I think we would typically still accept those. Scotty asked, what other documents confirm attendance other than certificates or reports? So I tried to answer, I answered this a little bit. One of the questions was, I'm part of this committee and we meet online. The email invitation that has the Zoom link in it that shows who all is going to be there, we've accepted that in the past. Screenshots of the Zoom, typically not accepted, but just whatever you can provide that would help document your attendance at that event is really what we're looking for.
Agendas from the
agendas
meeting,
work.
sign-in sheets, like Josh will be sending out, like we said, an email to confirm attendance, email confirmations like that. It doesn't have to be a pretty wall certificate. It just has to show that you attended, how long, delivery method, things like that were listed and discussed earlier.
And I did want to add something else too. If you're a company There's a couple questions about, having your in-house HR legal team or maybe an engineering division or design pod at your architecture firm give a presentation on something. We do it. We do typically accept those. But what I would recommend is you can all do your own completion certificates. There's no, if you wanted to do something, you can certainly do that. And we don't have any approved form that you use, but I would suggest that you put a couple things on certificates or the sign-in sheet. Those things would be what the topic was, who the presenter is and what company they represent or are from, like who the provider is, the date and the time, how long it is. If it was an hour, put down it was an hour. If it was 45 minutes, put that down. The most important thing, though, is the learning objectives. What did you expect your attendees to learn at that activity? That is extremely important to us when we review continuing education things for audits, because we can clearly see what that attendee what that presentation was designed to teach the attendee. What were the learning objectives? So that's really beneficial. If you can put the learning objectives down of the activity, that really helps us during the audit process, because otherwise we have to try to figure out what the topic was from the title, and that's not always the great way to do it. So if you can put the learning objectives on your documentation, that would be excellent.
I think I'm going to answer Brian, and I think Kent's or questions are pretty similar. So Brian asked, with the audit triggered on January 1, does it matter if we renew before completing all hours? Kent asks, if you flat out don't have your hours when it's time to renew and you answer that honestly on the renewal form, will the board give a grace period to get those hours completed? So Brian, if you attest by stating, yes, you have completed your continuing education requirements during the renewal and you're selected for an audit, and the board sees that you completed your hours outside or after that renewal period, the board will likely take disciplinary action against your license. And then Kent, if you flat out don't have your hours and you attest that you do not have your hours, you will not be able to renew your license until those hours are completed. So again, it's the board's recommendation that you just do not renew your license until you have satisfied all of those requirements, because really you're not doing anything besides holding your license anyway. So do not renew unless you've satisfied all of those requirements. Let's see here.
Amy, I'll pose a question to you that I see here a few places. Attending in person at different events that are otherwise qualifying, being technical in nature and related to a design profession, there is no restriction, no cap on those hours. If it's in person, unlimited, what they can claim, correct?
Correct.
Right.
It's only when it becomes web-based, then you start getting to those restrictions of if it's live, if it's provided by different organizations, that's where those restricted hours come in.
Right.
Correct. Marty, yes, this format is consistent with the expectation of real-time and interactive.
Yep.
We're able to have conversations, stop, answer questions, interact, things of that nature. Class webinar presented by a government agency would be accepted for credit. Again, that's one of those listed in 931 as a governmental agency. Those are not restricted. Does CE have to be live? Absolutely not. It can count as one of those restricted web-based courses, but again, you're limited to those numbers. But there is no requirement that it has to be live. Perfect, David. Brian, that's very honest of you. He took a course that was 1 hour in length, but listed 2 PDHs from the approved provider. How should I account for that? ethics. You can state that it was only one. John,
Yeah.
do you have
I
any
mean,
feedback?
just be truthful. If it's listed wrong on the certificate, just try to correct it for us when you submit your log. Yeah.
Let's see. Can we post a sample of the self-written certificate? I don't know that.
Let me try to share my screen here so you can see.
Tim, does this webinar count? We had stated that the board can't pre-approve courses, but it would likely see this kind of activity as appropriate.
Yeah. So if you can all see this, yes, Amy, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. This is essentially what I've done for presentations I've given. It lists, who gave it. It was live, right? So there's no question about whether it was online. It was live. I was there actually giving the presentation. How many hours it was. This was one for both engineering and architecture related. And I listed my learning objectives. What did I want the people to come away with? I wanted them to understand the current regulations, discuss the legislative bills introduced this year, and then go over and discuss potential board rules changes. And I'll stop sharing.
James asked, is every class taken at a conference or can it be entered with various as titles and various presenters? Typically at a conference, you can get your agenda or program. You can submit that, circle the courses you participated in. Sometimes they send reports at the end as well that you can fill in with the presentations that you attend, things like that. You don't have to individually, I guess, submit it, but you need to put them, if you're accounting for the whole conference on your log, you need to show that breakdown of hours as your supporting documentation.
Yep. Answered Margaret's question about ASCE. Yeah, anything provided by ASCE, that's a professional organization recognized at a national level. So anything they give online, even if it's not live, is not restricted. So you can get all your hours that way.
Time-based web courses that are not live. We just recently had this come up and it is not live. It's not if it's not live and not interactive and not in real time, if it does not meet those requirements, it is restricted and provided by one of those providers listed in 931. Newer rules require a learning activity, which is different from a CEU. Can you give examples of learning activities?
Yeah, again, the unit that the Nebraska board uses is hours. We don't use PDHs or CEUs. Our yardstick is hours. That's very easily grasped by everybody, and that's why we use it. So I think that's what your question was about.
Brad's asking why it's changed to when we renew now on the website, we don't get notified we're being audited or not instantly. Seems stressful situation, having to wait. That's the way the board chose to do audits going forward. And so that's how we will handle that going forward. If you give a technical engineering presentation to a college class as a presenter, don't the PDHs count for 2 times that duration? Yes, so 9424, if credit for teaching or presenting an activity may be credited double amount of actual hours. Again, the hours can only be counted if it's the first presentation. So if you do a presentation every year and it's the same material, that presentation can only be counted once.
Yeah. So I think there's still confusion about the non-live webinars. So again, I don't know if you can go back to the slide that talks about, that shows the categories of presenters.
Yeah, just a
Um,
second.
But AIA, ASCE, all types of activities that they provide are non-restricted because AIA is a professional architectural society. So none of the activities it provides, whether it's online, non-live, or online live, or in person, would be restricted. The same way with ASCE, IEEE. Those are technical societies recognized at a national level. So any type of CE activity they provide is unrestricted. Yeah, what's on the screen. So you can get all your web-based offerings through those. None of those are restricted. It's only if it's a web-based offering that's not live and is not one of those providers that's restricted to the quarter of the hours. So hopefully that clears that up. Yeah, product training classes, I think would likely be allowable, John. Those sound like they would be technical in nature. Yeah, and David's comment about COVID affecting the landscape for in-person PDH, the board realized that we actually did reduce the number of hours required during the height of COVID. But once it kind of died down, the board didn't see any reason to not reinstitute the hours back to the pre-pandemic levels. And yes, Randy, I would advise if it's a live webinar you're providing, put that somewhere on your completion certificate. Again, if it's live or non-live, that definitely helps. Other state board presentations, Robert, like this one, yes, we have typically accepted other states webinars like this for continuing education. I'm
gonna
not
jump
familiar
in.
with GPA Windstream, Jason, so I can't comment on that. There is likely going to be a cap on serving on a let's see, you're talking about a committee, Melissa. If it's, let me go back to our proposed rules so I can see it. So if you're participating in a professional or technical society on one of their technical committees, you can claim the actual hours spent on that committee. So Melissa, I hope that answers your question.
I'm going to jump in with a couple here that I see. Emeritus status, what you need to do to go back to full status, you must complete the reinstatement process. Information and all of the forms are on our website under engineer or architect, and then reinstatement as well. Let's see here. Receiving a certificate, Wayne, for this webinar. Yep, as we stated, you'll receive an email soon with it by the end of next week. I was trying to think of what day it was. By the end of next week at the latest, that will have your information, the hours, and all the information that we talked about that should be required on a certificate. It will be in an email form. Let's see. Oh, Josh already answered that.
Yeah, let me answer Brian's question here about the relationship between the NBEA and the board. We're actually the same thing. And we cannot actually say that yes, the board will approve this course for 1 hour because we have a rule that specifically prohibits pre-approval of courses. So all I can say is there's a very good chance the board will accept this for CE.
Real quick before we start losing a lot of our audience here, I'd love to chime in and just kind of go through the verification process for this. So if you're on your phone and you're calling in to this webinar, please shoot me an email, josh.firking@nebraska.gov. shoot me an email and let me know that you called in by phone, because otherwise webinar tracking your attendance can get a little funky. So it's good to just have that line of communication open. Secondly, if you're in a room with a bunch of your colleagues and you're all on one laptop, make sure you get a sign-in sheet or some kind of thing like that. Let me know who else attended with you that needs that verification, and I'll forward that your email to you and trust you to distribute that with them. And lastly, yeah, WebEx takes a bit of time to actually generate their attendance reports. So from that is where we base our certificates off of. So it could be the end of this week, it might be the end of next week at the latest, but we'll keep you guys updated. So that's kind of the process. If you're unsure about whether you're going to get credit or not, just shoot me an email anyways, and I'll make sure that you get it out. So that's all I have. We can go back to answering a few more questions, but I do have to bounce off for another meeting. So I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. And make sure you tune in to our blog post this month coming out here. I want to say the 27th is our proposed date for our next blog post.
Josh, I think if you jump off, you kick us all off. So I
I'll
think
keep
with
the
that
meeting running,
said,
but yep.
okay. All right. With that said, if you have any additional questions, feel free to email nbea.compliance@nebraska.gov or nbea.marketing@nebraska.gov, and we will get those questions answered. I appreciate everybody attending. This was our biggest webinar that we've hosted here this year, so thank you for attending, and I hope you guys got some information out of it. Again, all of the information will be posted on our YouTube channel and our website if you need to refer to it in the future. Let us know if you have any questions, and thanks again.